How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 2 of What If Deku Had a Time Quirk. And now, let's begin. One more thing, class. You can't become heroes without your hero costumes, of course. All Might would slam his finger down onto a massive red button, as all of a sudden, some briefcases would start to pile out of the wall behind All Might. As everyone would look on in shock, All Might would then start to speak again. Well, after you all put in your hero designs for the support course to make, we decided to make it happen earlier than expected. So here's your hero costumes. Grab your suitcase labeled by your seat number, then head down to the locker rooms, get changed, and then head out to the training grounds. And that's where we're going to be training. We have some special analysts that will be talking to you all about what your quirks are so that they can give you some accurate training exercises. Everyone would go down, put their hero costumes on before heading down to the training field. Once they would arrive there, they would see a massive group of just analysts and people that knew how to train everyone, as they would then be sitting there. Izuku recognized them as he saw a logo on some of their shirts. It was the same, just a group and team that had worked with him. It wasn't the exact same team, but rather the company. As Izuku would see this, UA or All Might would then walk up to all of them before telling them to go up and talk to one of them, and they'll explain what their quirks are, and you all just have to try to find out what it is. At least that's what we want you to do. Yeah, we know, All Might. Nezu told us everything. You can go sit over there and watch or something, or maybe help one of us. I don't really know. Alright, hello, Class 1A. We're here to try to help you with your training. So, I will now assign each of you to one of our special analysts so that they can see which training exercise would perfectly fit your quirk and needs. As each person there leading the just training exercise would match everyone up, as Izuku would end up going with the leader. Hello, Izuku. It appears we meet again. Izuku would nod his head as this was the same person that had led the other group to help train Izuku. So do you have anything in mind for me in training? The person would nod his head before telling Izuku that he wants him to age this tiny seed into a massive tomato plant, as Izuku would nod his head, as he would then plant it into the ground before focusing his energy as his hands would start to light up, as all of a sudden the just seed would start to grow and sprout into a massive tomato plant, as the person would nod their head. Now, right as Izuku was about to continue on going, the person would stop him. Now I want you to rewind it back to when it was a seed. As Izuku would do this, he would continue on rewinding it, as it would then turn back into a seed, as Izuku would look up towards the person. What appears your rewind and fast-forwarding abilities have pretty much gone to their limit. It's quite obvious to see this. There really can't be anything much else to this rewind and fast-forward thing besides just rewinding time on certain things. However, I do have a certain idea. Do you think you could heal something? As the person would whip out a knife out of their pocket before slashing their arm right on just the forearm right before the hand. As Izuku would look on in shock, not thinking that this person would go to such extremes. As Izuku would look at the now bleeding cut, he would walk over to it, his hand now glowing, as he would ask it, "Do you think I should fast forward it or rewind it?" Well, either way could actually work. If you think about it, rewinding it would make it so that it never happened, while fast forwarding it would just fast forward the healing process. However, I think you should rewind it just in case it might get infected if something were to fly in it, and fast forwarding it wouldn't really work too well, speeding up the infection as well. Izuku would nod his head before rewinding his arm to the point that it just never had the cut on it to begin with, as Izuku now had learned a new ability that he can heal things, and that it doesn't need to, well, he can heal things now, and he can focus on only a certain part, as Izuku would then walk up to a tree before looking at a branch on it, as he would then rewind the branch to the point where it was just tiny, hanging on to the tree. The person would nod his head, thinking, so it appears you still have some more abilities with your rewind and fast forward. But now you should probably just start training with your time just your stopping time ability and try to get it to as long as you possibly can. Izuku would nod his head, knowing that that's probably the best too, as it's its most powerful ability. So Izuku would try to stop time, stopping it, and would then try to hold it as long as possible, getting it to around a minute before time would start moving once again, as Izuku would then look back to him before he would ask how long did he do it. Izuku would answer with 60 seconds, so the person would nod. You can defeat a villain in only 60 seconds, but say if it's a very hard one, that might not be the case. Since you don't really have any sort of special abilities beyond your time, I really suggest you should get some sort of weapon to help combat your time skip. Say sort of like an energy blade or something. We're still working on the idea of it, because your fast forward and rewind work quite well as weapons in their own right. But just in case you don't think of using them or you can't use them at the time, like you can't use your hands, you should possibly think about other attacks you could use. Izuku would nod his head, but knowing that it would be quite hard for something like that to actually come into a real life idea. Well, not real life, for an idea, it just is impossible to think of something like that unless Izuku could fire out some sort of bullet with his mouth or something, just in case someone had his hands tied above him or tied up to the point where he couldn't use them. As Izuku would doing this, he would all of a sudden ask, wait, do you think I can not use my hands for my rewind and fast forward ability? The person thinking there would ask Izuku if he should try, which Izuku would then look back to the branch he had just did and would start to focus, thinking if it should fast forward back into the point it was. As Izuku would do this, the branch would start to slowly move. However, it wasn't as just precise as Izuku's hands. Sure, it got there, but it's not going to be to the best extent if it were to be healing. So Izuku had come to the final conclusion that healing he should do it with his hands, while if it's something more broad like taking down a villain or rewinding them back to their stage where they were a baby, he should probably just do it with his mind, say if he can't get close enough to them in range for his hands to really work too well. As Izuku thinking this, he would then be told that the day was up, that they had spent hours training already. The time had sort of passed quite quickly, as they would all then walk back to the classroom, where the analysts would then leave, as they would then be sitting there waiting for the next thing to happen. Now a week would pass of this training happening every single day, with Izuku finding out newer and newer abilities, how close he could use his fast-forward rewind, and how far he could do it, all of that, as finally Friday would appear. Alright class, the analysts have left and your training has now finished. Hopefully you all learned great techniques to use your training here at UA, as you're going to be given a lot of free time to train. So just make sure whenever you get free time, you dedicate at least half of it to training your quirks. That's the true dedication we're looking for here for the top heroes. So, now what we are going to be doing is called the Heroes vs. Villains assignment. Basically, there's going to be two teams within a building, the villain team and the hero team. The villain team will be forced to hide a device within it, while the hero team will be forced to walk in there and touch the device to win or capture both of them. As Izuku would be thinking of this, All Might would then start to draw the teams. While the first team is Izuku versus Izuku, and let me see here, All Might would pull out another name before seeing it was Bakugo Katsuki. The first team, the heroes, will be Bakugo Katsuki and Izuku Midoriya, while the second team will be Todoroki, Shoto, and Momo Yaoyorozu, All Might would say, as the class would nod their heads, as All Might would then finish making the teams. Alright, go down to the locker rooms, get changed into your hero costumes, and now head over to City Site A. That's where we will find the building that the first two teams will be just taking place with their fight in. All of them would head down there, as they would then get changed, heading off to the city as they would then arrive. Alright, villain team, you may now head in. Shoto, Todoroki, and Momo Yaoyorozu would head in, grabbing the device on their way before hiding it in one of the random floors, as they would then start to build up the fences using Momo's Quirk, as Izuku and Bakugo would then be told that they may now head in. Now, Izuku and Bakugo don't have the such rocky relationship that they do in canon My Hero Academia. Bakugo just learned to respect Izuku because of how powerful his quirk was said to be, as Bakugo had never saw it in person, as many of the people actually hadn't seen Bakugo's quirk in its full extent, only seeing these sparks fly as a sort of warning. So if Bakugo can get away with that, Izuku could get away with much worse, just saying he doesn't use it, and it's really not just being able to show you. It's actually quite hard to show someone what his quirk is actually capable of. So Bakugo would learn to respect Izuku, as they would end up becoming known as the two most powerful students in all of just the city, as they were seen as the best hero prospects coming out of middle school, while Bakugo was still a little more unknown. Izuku had a name spread far and wide, having a mysterious quirk. This is to the disappointment of all of the trainers, as the people in Izuku's class and school had spread rumors about how powerful his quirk was far and throughout the city, causing Izuku to be sort of a local celebrity, with people thinking he's going to be the number one hero, even though they hadn't seen his quirk yet, which was quite strange for them to believe something such like that can be so easily lied about. So as both Izuku and Bakugo would walk in, Izuku would tell Bakugo that they need to come up with a plan. Izuku would tell him that he should probably just stop time real quick and beat them, as Bakugo would look over towards Izuku and would ask him, what does he mean? Well, I think it's finally time you realize what my quirk is. I can stop and restart time while also fast-forwarding and rewinding certain times on things. I can't really go too far without explaining it, and since we need a plan, I might as well tell you what it is. Bakugo would nod his head before telling him that they can go the easy way out, stopping time as soon as Izuku gets up to the final floor where their device is probably located, stopping time and basically just touching it, easily giving them the win, or beating both of them, or just trying to beat them to get more of glory. Izuku would say he probably shouldn't go with the easy way out, as that's never always the best option, especially if we're looking to gain more experience. Bakugo would nod his head as they would then walk throughout the floors, not seeing any signs of life. Once they would finally make it up to the top floor, there they would see Momo and Todoroki standing up there, waiting for them to walk through the final door. Izuku would walk into the door as both Todoroki and Momo would get on guard, as Momo would create a bow staff, while Todoroki would slam his foot down on the ground, setting a small iceberg, slamming right towards both Izuku and Bakugo. However, Izuku would stop time before placing Bakugo right in front of Todoroki, as Izuku would go right behind Momo, as Izuku would mutter under his breath that time has begun moving once again, as Bakugo would then see Todoroki right in front of him as he would wind his fist back, slamming an explosion right into Todoroki's face, where Izuku would then quickly and easily knock out Momo with a single chop to the back of the neck. As Todoroki would be sent flying backwards, he would catch himself on the ground with his feet before running back up towards Bakugo, going for a punch. However, Izuku would put Todoroki into a chokehold before knocking him out with another chop to the neck that he had done to Momo as well, as they would then both touch the device, as All Might would give them the victory, seeing as they were able to knock out both of the villain team and touch the device in under 5 minutes. It was very clear that they were a great team together, as they would then walk back as Momo and Todoroki would end up walking back with them as well. Congratulations, Hero Team. You all did quite well, even creating a plan at the start. It shows that you are quite capable of becoming great heroes. You already have great knowledge and extent of what being a hero is, being teamwork already, and we're not even 2 months into the school year. That's quite impressive. As All Might would be saying this, both of them would nod their heads, just in acceptance, as the rest of the teams would end up going. A couple months would end up passing as Izuku and Bakugo and the rest of the class would walk into school knowing that today was the day that they were going on a field trip. This is what all of their training had been going up for, as this field trip was going to be just all about rescue and all of this. They had been learning teamwork, just hero moves that they could use with each other, special kinds of moves, all of this sort of thing, but now it's going to be used to save others. They really had not learned any rescue sort of training at all up until this point. So as all of them would be just sitting in class, Aizawa would walk in before telling them that they all need to go either put their hero costumes on or PE uniforms and head down to the bus bay. They're not waiting for anyone who's late. As he would then walk off as everyone would rush down, putting on their hero costumes before getting on to the bus bay, where they would then get onto a bus, travel off to the unforeseen simulation joint. So they would all pile out of the bus, looking on at the massive dome circular building in front of them, as many of them would look on in just pure excitement and joy as 13 would step out of the building, opening one of the doors before yelling, "Welcome, Class 1A! This is the unforeseen simulation joint, otherwise known as the USJ. Here you're going to be doing other sorts of rescue exercises and different things that are going to match your quirk quite well. We're going to see what matches your quirk in different scenarios, along with matching you up with things that don't match your quirk so well. So, why don't we head inside?" Aizawa and Ida would walk up the stairs as everyone would follow both of them, as they would then arrive up at the top of the stairs, where Aizawa and 13 would push open the doors leading into the massive building. Many of them would look on in shock at just how big this building was, where they would marvel at all of the different zones and everything that just looked crazy, as 13 would then start to explain the different zones, that there's the water zone where a flood's going to happen as water is going to slowly overtake a boat. You're going to have to learn how to use that, as we're also going to be using you as trying to rescue us. We're going to be going around after around 20 minutes of once you've gotten used to the zone and how everything works. We're going to be going around and you have to find a way to save us in that certain zone. So, why don't we start off with the flood zone? How about this group here? You, and all of a sudden a purple portal would start to open up in the middle of these just fountain area, as all of them would look on towards it, as many of them were thinking, is this sort of a training exercise? Is this sort of like how we're all supposed to go attack them without any word or warning? As Aizawa would look on, looking down, as he would see many villains pile out of the portal, as Aizawa would then tell them that this isn't an exercise, they all need to get back and out of that door as quickly as possible. However, before they can, a portal would open up behind them as villains would start to pile out of that portal as well. Izuku would stop time before going in and punching all of these villains as time was stopped. And all of a sudden, as time would begin moving once again, all of these villains would feel a severe punch go right onto their face, sending them flying, knocking into each other, as many of them would end up being knocked out, as many of the people would look on in shock at this, including Kurogiri, who would just put all of the people that were supposed to be on top of the staircase up there, and they were all now gone. He was confused at this, but would then travel back down to Shigaraki, as Shigaraki would then yell, "Good morning, UA! It's us, the League of Villains. You've probably heard about us a couple times in the news. Well, that doesn't really matter now. This is going to be your end. Why don't you say your final goodbyes to each other before you met a gruesome fate?" As he would then be saying this, Kurogiri would open up a portal underneath all of the students, spreading them out, scattering them throughout all of the different zones. As Izuku would be doing this, he would start to fall down into the portal, as would then try to stop time, stopping it as he would then reach over, grabbing on to one of the ledges, pulling himself up out of the portal, as he would then see some of his classmates fall through it as well, where he would help them up as time would begin moving once more, once he had helped everyone out of the portal that he could. So there were still many of his students scattered around, but there was only around 3 or 4 of him and the 2 teachers standing up at the top of the staircase. Izuku would ask Aizawa what he should do to help, as Aizawa would tell him that he needs to stay back. However, Izuku would yell for Aizawa that he's been training with professional heroes and all these people that have trained professional heroes to become a hero. He shouldn't have to be told not to help people. As Aizawa would just sigh before saying, "Fine, I guess you can help me. 13. Protect the students that are already up here, possibly go around saving the others within the zones." 13 would nod her head as both Aizawa and Izuku would jump down, and would end up starting their fight against the massive horde of villains. Izuku would power up both of his hands with his rewind and fast forward in both hands, as Izuku would go around grabbing the heads of villains as they would come close to him, rewinding them or fast forwarding them into old age or making them young as a child again, as all of the villains would look on in shock at Izuku's capability and power, including Shigaraki that would look on in interest. All for one should know about this kid's quirk. It appears quite interesting, being able to people younger or older. That could be quite powerful if we were able to get our hands on it. We should possibly try to do something with it. As Kurogiri would nod his head, as Izuku would be seen just continue on doing this before stopping time, going around punching many of the villains around there, where they would then be sent flying back as time would end up getting moving again. As Izuku would do this, many of the villains would start to back up from them, where Aizawa would then come in, erasing their quirks before defeating them using his scarf or punching them with his insane martial arts. As all of this would end up being happening, the entire army would easily be decimated by the combined help of Izuku and All Might. Or not All Might, Aizawa. I've confused All Might and Aizawa so many times in my what ifs, it's kind of stupid. So Aizawa and Izuku would just destroy and decimate this entire army as Shigaraki would snap his fingers, motioning for Kurogiri to open up a portal. As Kurogiri would do this, a massive purple bird monster would step out of this portal with scars littering its body all over. Ah, so you managed to defeat my entire army. That doesn't really matter to me, as you're not going to be able to defeat this here thing. Do you want to know its name before you die to its hands? It's called the Nomu, and it's the last thing you're gonna see before you die. As Kurogiri would motion his hand out, motioning for the Nomu to go and attack, as he would yell, "Nomu! Kill those two, and then the entirety of these UA brats while you're at it." As the Nomu would scream as if giving a yes or saying that he got Shigaraki's orders, before it would jump leaping off towards Aizawa and Izuku, as Aizawa was about to erase its quirk. However, before he could, he would feel a monstrous punch connect with his cheek, as Izuku would stop time, as he would see the Nomu in a certain motion. As Izuku would see this, he would then use his rewind quirk, starting to rewind the Nomu. However, as he was doing this, time would begin moving again, where the Nomu would see Izuku behind him, as he would then backhand Izuku, sending him flying back. As Izuku would see this, Aizawa would end up being slammed down into the ground again, as Izuku would push the pile of rubble off of him, as he would race off to help Aizawa once again. As Izuku would make it there, Aizawa was struggling deeply with the Nomu, as Izuku would stop time, grabbing Aizawa from the grips of the Nomu before rushing up the stairs, before saying that time has begun moving again, putting his hands down on Aizawa's injuries, rewinding them to the point that they were never there. Aizawa would thank Izuku before looking on towards the Nomu, saying that this is going to be a very hard fight. Almost right as that happened, the Nomu would scream once again, rushing up towards them, as Izuku would jump right towards where the Nomu was. Izuku would look down towards his pocket before taking something out, looking at the handle that was now in his hands. I guess it's finally time to use this. Izuku would click a button, as the Nomu would finally reach the top of the stairs, as Izuku would slash with the newly found energy blade in his hands. The support corps, along with the help of other heroes and funding, had managed to create a sort of energy beam with new forms of technology, and with the vast experience and brand-like ability of the company that had helped Izuku, they were able to get Izuku one of these so that he could help use it in his training, just as an even more answer to if his quirks just don't work. Say if some odd occurrence happens to happen. So as Izuku would slash, the Nomu would fall down, as its front torso would then fall back to the ground, as its legs would be standing there completely still, so the legs would fall to its knees before slamming down to the ground. However, the Nomu's body would then instantly regenerate back, as Izuku would look on, thinking that this is going to be a lot harder than he thought. All of a sudden, the doors would be slammed open as All Might would finally have arrived there, seeing that the Nomu was there. All Might, who had a smile on his face before right about to say, "I am here," would look on to see all of the villain bodies and the Nomu there, as he would rush in, jumping right at the villain or the Nomu, grabbing its head, slamming it into its knee, as it would then jump back. "Ah, All Might, you finally arrived. I guessed you'd finally show your ugly head here after a while. Guess you might have been busy doing something and letting your students die. I'm gonna make an assumption and say half of them are already dead. So I suggest you better start counting your days here as the teacher at UA. As you're not the best teacher letting half your class die, are you, All Might?" As All Might would disregard this, only using it to fuel his anger, as he would continue on punching Nomu, as Izuku would yell that All Might needs to step back. All Might would do this as Izuku, now having his energy blade in hand, would then lift it up above his head, slamming it down into the Nomu's skull and brain area, completely cutting it in half, as Izuku would cut the entire Nomu in just two. Right as Izuku's blade made contact with the brain of the Nomu, it would scream out a massive shriek of pain as the Nomu's two halves would fall apart as Izuku had made his way through the entire Nomu. As Shigaraki, seeing as Izuku had defeated the Nomu and had found its key weakness, he would rush off through the portal of Kurogiri as he would and ask Kurogiri to make a portal to where All For One's hideout was. As he would do this, he would then kneel down before All For One, before telling him all about how powerful Izuku's quirk was, and saying that there's some kid. He can possibly fast forward and rewind someone's age. He's quite skillful in his craft. I suggest you possibly try to kidnap him and take his quirk, or maybe even make him into a Nomu. He'd make quite the powerful one, you know. All For One would nod his head before telling him that type of quirk would be quite powerful if he can make his enemies older and basically put them out of service, or possibly even make them younger and make them into villains that could possibly help fight against the others. As All For One be nodding about this, he would then just tell Shigaraki that he did good, but where's the Nomu? Shigaraki would tell him, unfortunately, that damn kid who has the power is able to destroy it. That's why I wanted to tell you this. He's quite skillful. He'd make a great villain if you were to brainwash him. Possibly turn him back into a villain if you were to steal his quirk and then give it back to him. All For One would nod his head once more as we now cut back to All Might and Izuku in the USJ. They would rush around the USJ, saving all of the different students around there, as All Might would ask them if they are hurt or not, which they would then say no. All Might was in shock. Everywhere he went, there was villain bodies laying everywhere. His class and students had been trained so well that they were able to easily defeat these thugs. It was quite insane. He never thought his class would be able to take care of mass villains before, thinking that they still had no experience with having to deal with the stress of being a hero. However, they were easily able to take them down, even though their lives were at risk. And he was quite proud of the way he had taught them, as seeing as they were already quite strong, being able to defeat all those villains without the help of a pro hero already. As they would then collect all of the students, Aizawa would take roll call, making sure that everyone was there. As the police would end up being called, arriving on the scene with many armored vehicles, packing in all of the different villains into the vehicles, just making sure that they would end up going off to prison. As many of them would take these student statements just all about this certain thing, All Might would then tell them that they need to keep this under wraps. Now, the heroes would already nod their head, as they were the UA campus police, as the UA already had an entire police force, just as an added security measure. Yep, we already know, All Might. Seeing as it's your still first year, I decided to let you know that this is actually the campus police. We actually have our own jail, but we're not going to be having them here. The jail's actually miles off of campus in the middle of nowhere, so even if they do escape, they'll probably die of dehydration or something. All Might would nod his head, as he would then just go back to making sure everyone was okay, and anyone who had supposedly been injured, Izuku would be tasked with helping them, rewinding just their certain part of their body that was injured back to the point that it just wasn't injured at all. And that is where I'm going to leave this What If off, everyone. I hope you all did enjoy part 2 of What If Deku Had a Time Quirk. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.